All right, hey everyone. Let's jump into a deep dive today into something pretty fascinating. I think really relevant for anyone, especially if you're prepping for the UPSC and thinking about international relations as your optional. We're going to tackle this idea of Plato's philosopher-king.
It's interesting, isn't it, how this concept, like, it's ancient, right? But it still has so much to say about leadership, not just in some, like, theoretical utopia, but, like, in the real world, the messy world of global politics you're all diving into.
Yeah, full disclosure, when I first heard like philosopher running the world, I kind of thought, wait, is this a joke? But seriously, the more we've been digging into this, the more I see how it connects to something really important, like crucial for international relations, that whole question of what makes a leader a truly effective leader.
Absolutely, and you hit the nail on the head. Plato, he wasn't just like, daydreaming in some ivory tower. He was trying to get at like the essence of what makes a society, any society, function well. And for him, that all started with leadership that was rooted in wisdom, not just like power grabs or
Hmm.
popularity contests.
Okay, so where do we even begin unpacking all of this? I mean, Plato's philosophy, it can be pretty dense.
Yeah, no doubt. So let's start with like one of his most fundamental distinctions, and that's the difference between knowledge and opinion. Think about it this way. There's the world, the one we experience with our senses, right? And it's full of all these like fleeting impressions and biases. There's just a lot of noise, frankly. And that's the realm of opinion. But Plato, he argued that there's this deeper level, like a whole realm of true knowledge, and he called this the world of forms.
Okay, I'm already feeling a bit lost in the clouds here. Can we get like a more concrete example, something a little more down to earth?
Sure, sure. So imagine you're analyzing a peace treaty, right? Like on the surface, it might look like a total masterpiece of diplomacy, all this beautiful language about cooperation and whatnot. But a leader who's only operating on the level of opinion, they might get completely swept up in the beauty of those words.
So they're focused on the appearances, on storing points, political points, maybe.
Exactly. But a true philosopher king, like how Plato saw it, they would operate from this place of deeper knowledge. They'd analyze the treaties, the underlying principles, its long-term consequences, like potential consequences, and they'd be asking, does this truly align with a vision of justice and lasting peace?
So it's about seeing through the surface, getting to the core of things. Am I getting that right?
Precisely.
Hmm.
And that brings us to Plato's famous allegory of the cave. It really, I think it drives this point home. So picture this. A group of people, and they're trapped in a cave. Their whole lives, all they've ever seen are these shadows, and these shadows are projected onto a wall. They think those shadows are reality.
Until one person escapes, right? And then they see the world like illuminated by the sun, the source of true knowledge. It's that like aha moment when you suddenly realize there's this whole other level of understanding you were totally missing.
Exactly. And for Plato, that journey out of the cave, that is the philosopher's journey. It's about seeking that true knowledge, not just accepting the shadows, the opinions, the biases of the world around them.
Okay, yeah, I'm starting to see why this matters for someone who wants to be a diplomat. Like in international relations, you're constantly dealing with like a flood of information, conflicting narratives, hidden agendas everywhere. Being able to actually see the sunlight from the shadows, that feels pretty crucial.
Absolutely crucial. A leader who can't separate, who can't distinguish between, fleeting opinion and enduring truth, they're going to make decisions based on shaky ground. And that could have some really potentially disastrous consequences.
So for Plato, the philosopher, the one who's like trained their mind to see past the shadows, they're the best equipped to lead. I mean, that's a pretty radical idea.
It is radical. He even went so far as to say, and this is a direct quote, until philosophers become kings, there is no other road to real happiness. He truly, truly believed that philosophers, not, career politicians, were the ideal rulers.
Oh, okay, that's a bold statement, but come on. I mean, weren't there philosophers back then who were, let's be honest, kind of useless?
Yeah.
Like all these theories, but totally detached from the real world, from reality?
You're actually echoing a criticism that Plato himself addressed. One of his characters, Adeimantus, he argues that many philosophers seem, well, frankly useless, even villainous, some of them. But Plato's response, it's actually really interesting. He suggests that society is often to blame, like it doesn't value wisdom. It pushes true philosophers to the margins, because they're not focused on wealth or power.
So the problem isn't with the philosophers themselves, it's the system they're operating in, the environment.
Right. Exactly. And think about how relevant that is to the world you're studying. I mean, international relations, it's full of pressures to compromise, to play the game, to put those short-term gains over long-term vision.
That makes so much sense. Like, especially in a field as complex as international relations, having that strong philosophical foundation, that ability to think critically and see beyond the immediate pressures, it seems crucial.
Absolutely. And that actually leads us into another one of Plato's key ideas, and that's the idea of statecraft as soulcraft.
Hmm.
He truly believed that a well-governed society, a just society, requires leaders who are themselves just. They have to embody those virtues.
So it's not just about policies and strategies. It's about the character, the person, the leader themselves.
Precisely. And this connects directly to questions that you will be grappling with as you go deeper into international relations. What qualities should we be looking for in leaders on the global stage? What kind of ethical framework should guide their decisions?
Okay, I'm seeing how these like ancient ideas are still so relevant today. It's like Plato's giving us this whole framework for thinking about leadership that goes way beyond just political maneuvering.
Exactly. He's asking us to really think about what makes a leader effective, and not just in terms of power, but in terms of wisdom, justice, the pursuit of the common good.
This is fascinating. For our listeners, especially those who are deep in their UPSC prep, I'm already seeing how valuable these insights are. But before we go too far, let's break down what Plato actually meant by a philosopher. It wasn't just anyone who could, quote Socrates.
Oh, not at all. He had a very, very specific definition in mind. For Plato, a philosopher wasn't just like a bookworm or a debater. A philosopher was a lover of wisdom, a truth seeker, someone who constantly was striving to understand like the fundamental nature of things.
So it's more than just having knowledge. It's about having that deep desire to learn, to understand.
Exactly. Remember that distinction, knowledge versus opinion. The philosopher is always seeking to move beyond just opinion, beyond the shadows, toward that true light of knowledge. They're not content with, like, the superficial explanations. They want to go deeper, uncover those underlying principles that govern reality.
I'm starting to see how that kind of thinking, that would be essential for navigating the complexities of international relations, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. It's about developing that critical mind, that analytical mindset that lets you see past the spin,
Yeah.
the propaganda, the short-term political calculations. It's about getting to the heart of the matter. And that skill set, that will serve you well, not just in your UPSC exams, but throughout your whole career in international relations. And this is where we get to one of the big criticisms of Plato's philosopher-king, the elitism factor, right? Critics, they argue that it assumes that only a select few, the ones with all this philosophical training, are actually fit to rule. It does sound kind of undemocratic, doesn't it?
Yeah, it kind of feels like it's saying most people are stuck in that cave, happy with the shadows. And it's only these special few who can actually handle the sunlight, the true knowledge. I get why that rubs some people the wrong way.
And it's really important here to remember the historical context, right? I mean, Plato was writing in ancient Greece, where democracy was still a pretty new experiment. And his own experience with Athenian democracy, especially like the trial and execution of his mentor, Socrates, that probably made him, well, question the whole wisdom of the crowds thing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I can imagine like seeing your teacher condemned to death by popular vote. That would definitely make you rethink the whole power to the people idea.
For sure, right. So while we can totally critique those elitist aspects of Plato's thinking, especially today, it's important to understand where he was coming from. And okay, even if we kind of set aside the question of who should rule, there's still a lot of value in what he says about the qualities of a good ruler, right? Wisdom, justice, courage, real concern for the common good. I mean, those are qualities that I think we'd probably all agree are important no matter what the political system.
Yeah, those are like timeless leadership qualities, especially when you think about like the challenges the world is facing today.
Mm.
Climate change, global inequality, conflict, these issues, they need leaders who are more than just, savvy politicians.
Right. Consider like what it takes to be an effective diplomat, building consensus among all these different nations, tackling those really complex global problems. It seems like the leaders who are just driven by their own self-interest, those might not be the best fit for the job.
Yeah, I mean, Plato, he would probably say that the people who've really grasped that form of the good, the ones who've escaped the cave, they're the ones who are actually equipped to lead humanity towards a better future. It's idealistic, sure, but it's also kind of inspiring in a way.
It is. And it's not just about those individual leaders, right? Think about like what would an ideal state look like on a global level? Like a global order that was based on justice, on real cooperation, a shared commitment to the well-being of everyone. What would that even look like?
Whoa, that's taking Plato's thinking to a whole other level, isn't it? Would we need like a global philosopher king?
Hmm.
Or maybe like a council of philosopher kings and queens to guide us?
That's a really interesting thought. Or maybe instead of focusing on those specific individuals, maybe we should think about how to cultivate those philosophical virtues, that love of wisdom, justice, that broader perspective, but within our institutions and systems of global governance.
So shifting the focus from like a single all-knowing leader to a system that actually encourages those values.
Exactly. How do we create a global order that isn't just about, power plays and national interests, but something more ethical, more sustainable, something that's actually working towards the common good of all of humanity?
Those are the questions that make international relations so fascinating and so challenging. And it's clear that even though Plato was writing centuries ago, his ideas are still shaping how we think about global politics today.
They really are. And for all those listeners out there, those who are on that UPSC journey, especially tackling international relations, engaging with these philosophical ideas, even if they seem a little abstract at first, it can really be a game changer.
It's not just about memorizing all those facts and figures. It's about developing those critical thinking skills, that ability to grapple with the big questions about power, about justice, about the kind of world we actually want to build. And hey, who knows? Maybe somewhere out there listening right now is a future philosopher, king or queen.
Maybe they are. And if you're out there, future leader, we salute you. But even if you're not planning on, world domination, understanding Plato's ideas, it's incredibly enriching. It's like having a conversation with one of history's greatest minds, challenging all those assumptions you might have and pushing you to think about the world in these totally new ways.
That's a great way to put it. So as we're kind of wrapping up our deep dive here into Plato's philosopher king, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with? Especially those UPSC aspirants who are getting ready for that international relations paper.
Well, first and foremost, I really hope they see just how relevant these philosophical ideas are to understanding international relations. I mean, Plato might have been writing centuries ago, but his questions about leadership, about justice, about the common good, they're as relevant today as they ever were, maybe even more so.
Yeah, it's not just ancient history, right? It's about using these ideas to actually like analyze and understand the world we live in, the world today.
Exactly. And secondly, I hope our listeners, I hope they really think about like what qualities we actually need in our leaders on the global stage. Like, do we want leaders who are just motivated by self-interest? Or do we want leaders who are guided by, a sense of ethics, a commitment to something bigger than themselves?
Hmm. That's a big question, isn't it?
Hmm.
And it's a question I think that we all need to consider, like, what kind of leadership do we really want to see in the world? What kind of world are we actually trying to create?
Yeah, good point. And finally, I hope this whole deep dive, I hope it encourages everyone listening to just keep exploring these ideas, to engage with all those different philosophical perspectives out there and really develop, your own critical thinking skills. The UPSC journey, it's about so much more than just memorizing a bunch of facts, right? It's about cultivating that curious mind, that thirst for knowledge, and a passion for, actually making a difference in the world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And who knows, maybe this journey, maybe it'll inspire some of our listeners to become like the philosopher kings and queens of the 21st century.
Hmm.
Or at the very least, it'll equip them to be, thoughtful, engaged citizens who can actually grapple with all these complex challenges that we're facing in the world today.
Exactly, exactly. And on that note, I want to leave our listeners with just one final thought to kind of ponder, to think about what would a philosopher king even look like in the 21st century? Like, what kind of knowledge, what skills, and what virtues would they need to navigate today's, this incredibly interconnected world?
That's a fantastic question to consider as you all continue on that UPSC journey. And hey, if you enjoyed this whole deep dive into Plato and the Philosopher King, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your fellow UPSC warriors out there. We have plenty more insightful deep dives coming your way, so definitely stay tuned. Until next time, keep those minds sharp and those spirits high.
Happy studying, everyone.